Welcome back. You're watching Fiji Village Straight Talk. I'm Vijay Narayan, and our second guest tonight, as we're talking about issues that are happening on the ground in Fiji, organization like Aruka Fiji, Patrinoke and Roundup talking about that in detail, and he'll be back in the third segment with Sarah Osborne to talk about psychosocial support, mental health being a big issue on the streets as well, and how we all are coping and what more we can do. I have with me as our second guest tonight, 28-year-old Asta Sonner. Asta, of course, is German Fijian. And thank you very much, Asta, for coming on the show this evening.
Thank you for having it.
Now, Asta, you have lived on the streets in Suva for a few years. You had come from Germany. You were born in Germany. And then you had come to Fiji when you were around 10. Tell us about that time.
Well, my mother is Fijian, and it was initially through her that brought us to Fiji. It was her wanting to come back to her homeland. During that time, it was a very big culture shock for me, going from Germany to Fiji. And we had a good adjustment period. From there, we moved to a little bit to Rotuma for a couple of years before we came back to Fiji. And that's when the whole schooling and everything started. And it was good in the beginning. But that was the start of how it happened.
Now, coming in at 10, as you said, culture shock, and then trying to understand things. A few years later, I think you shared with me when you were about around 16 years old, you had to go on the streets. If you can tell our viewers, how did that happen?
Sure. So what actually happened was there was a family breakdown. As most homes have these days, where mother and father just aren't as compatible as they used to be, and they break down. The children suffer from that. During that time, I never thought that would happen to me. I wasn't prepared for anything like this, but things happen. So when my parents split up, my mother left, not too sure where she left at the time, and my father had also gone back to Germany. So during that time, I didn't really have much of a foundation. I didn't know how to, sustain myself.
You had no siblings?
I'm an only child. Yeah. And so schooling wasn't really a option anymore. So I had to drop out of school. Now, during that period, I managed to stay for a little bit longer before I was evicted. My landlord found out, and he was a bit of a sneaky one. And he had gotten the police back then to take me out of my home. And I remember that everything I ever owned in that house, from childhood to that age, was taken. So I had nothing. The only real place I could go to was Suva City. So arriving in Suva City, the number one spot where I hung out most of my time, where I found that I could have some shelter, was the internet shops. So back then it was Cyberzone. That's very close by to McDonald's. It's closed down now. But that's where I spend most of my days. And
You'd sleep there as well?
Well, it started off like this. I would make friends and be like, hey, can you pay for my night pack? And that was where you pay an X amount of money, and then you can use the internet shop the whole night. And I was able to maintain that image. I was very embarrassed of my situation. And I was making good friends, and we were hanging out and all that stuff, but I didn't have a home to go back to. So it was more so, yeah, you guys go ahead. I'm just going to hang out here and play some games. But I would sleep in the internet shop. And this was the early stages where I was still looking very fresh and clean. During that time, things deteriorated very quickly.
No contact with your mom or dad?
Nothing. I had no contact with anyone, really. I didn't know my extended family, Rotuma family yet. So I had no real work skills. So pretty much the only way I could get money was asking my friends, hey, do you have, a couple bucks here and there? Now, as time went on, I was having some difficulties with the actual place. I couldn't stay there. I was getting dirty. It was hard to maintain. And I transitioned to Sukuna Park. So most days would be at Sukuna Park, hang out throughout the day with some of the other street dwellers, some of my friends. And we would go around, and I learned the methods they used to survive. There's a rubbish bin behind McDonald's where the security guard is. And if you made friends with him, whatever scraps, anything that they would pick from the front, he would sometimes give it to you. And that's how we survived. We got food from there, or we went to the rubbish bins themselves, or we picked up from the food court. So I had a little routine where almost every day I would go up to MECC before it closes. I look for all the little plates that had a little bit of food left, and I collect them. And in the beginning, it was very embarrassing. But you have to do what you need to do to survive. And although I had a few who did turn to crime, such as grabbing around and things like that, that's something I never wanted to resort to. That's just not who I am. And so that's how I, sustain myself. Through that, also learned how to joke very casually. I would go behind the FMPF Plaza, preferably on a Thursday or a Friday, because that's when I knew there was payday. So I'd go, I'd see someone I'd make sure I'm clean. I got fresh clothes from Valley City. I've got a little bit of money that I can use for, sanitary wipes, so I can look fresh and clean. I had a broken phone that I found, and I would walk quickly.
You'd make yourself look like you're not on the streets.
Not on the streets. I would walk very quickly, and I'd observe. That's one thing I learned being on the streets, is to observe, to adjust, to adapt. And I would observe to see who looked like they had a good heart, who looked open, not closed off. And I would walk up to them and say, excuse me, sir, excuse me, man, would you have, $1, $2? I'm trying to get back to Pacific Harbor. I just haven't got any money on me right now. I'm just trying to get back home. And I'll be lucky. Sometimes $5, $2. Sometimes I'd get no money. But that's how I, managed to feed myself, managed to keep myself clean before the internet shop closed down. Right? From there, I transitioned to the next one. Next one was literally right across PC Station. And I think during that time, I was struggling the most. Because it would be, I get the money, I come in, and it wasn't very sanitary. The place was riddled with bed bugs. It was very dirty, and yeah. And I'd take my money, and I'd use the internet for a little bit. Then I'd go to the back, put down the cushions from the seats on the side, and I'd lie down there, I'd sleep. And after maybe a month or so, the guy who was there noticed that, and he'd throw me out. And I never bothered anyone. I never stole, I never bothered anyone. I paid my money. I just needed a place to be safe. And he threw me out. He said, hey, no. I said, take my money. He said, I don't care. Get out. So, okay. So, to Sukuna Park, And during that time, it had been very disheartening. Being in that situation, not really having a place where I can find safety. So, being in Sukuna Park, meeting others who were not good for me, I started to drink, started to, not care so much about cleaning myself. And the feeling of, being sticky, being stinky is not a good feeling. All right.
It just seems like after you could not sleep in the computer shops, the rejection just set in completely.
It was a big part of it. But the true rejection, the point where I started to feel almost hate towards people, and this is something I want to touch on, is when you would ask someone for help. Not much. And I wouldn't even bother them. Be more so passing by and excuse me, ma'am. And they'd go, sir. It's that reaction from them towards you that makes you feel less than human. You don't have any malice intention. You don't have any bad intention. You're simply reaching out, and they shoo you away like an animal, like a dog in the trash. And that's the part I believe many of the youths back then, I've seen this. Many of the kids that I was with during the time, I still see many of them still on the streets today. And back then they were good-hearted. They just tried to get their next meal. And they asked respectfully, and they didn't know any better. Majority of children, they didn't know the tactics that I use. And the continuous rejection that they got, the continuous get away, turned them sour, and they were young. And so I saw this thought form in their mind where they're like, okay, I'm trying to survive, and you're treating me like a bad person, so I will give you that. I'll give you a bad person. I will grow up. A couple of years from now, I'll be bigger. I'll be stronger. And then I can defend myself. I can take, not just ask, I can take what I want. Someone walking down the road in the dark, I'll take it. I won't ask anymore. And that's something that I've seen many of my friends transition into. Some have made it out. Some still are very humble. Some have lost their sanity. And I don't blame them. And one of the things that I've distinctively remembered from that period is lying at Suva. It is extremely cold. And when you get caught in the rain, your shoes fill up with water. And these are the little things that slowly break you down over time, not being able to have dry feet. And it hurts the soles of your feet. So I remember during that time, I had pretty much given up on the whole trying to keep myself clean. I would have loved a shower. And I remember distinctively lying down in front of Tico's floating restaurant, and someone came to touch my pockets. Their complexion, right? Someone had come to touch my pockets, and I presume they thought I had been, a night out lying down, and they didn't find anything. And their response, I remember waking up and like, I don't have anything. And their response to that was violence, to pick me up and throw me over the seawall. I remember that very clearly, falling into the water, not being able to get up, and just bouncing along the side. And coming to the platform that leads out of the ocean from the seawall, I walked further up to where the lighthouse is. It's a watchtower, I believe. I always thought it was a lighthouse. And I climbed up there, which was very difficult. And I was sitting right at the top with a board leaned up to protect it from the wind, mosquitoes, rain. And I was just looking at a building window. I cannot remember what building it was. I just remember looking into a building window and seeing a warm orange glow and thinking, I would just love to have that. A place where I can be safe. So that was one of the main turning points for me, where I decided to myself, I had hit rock bottom. I had contemplated things to just end it for not seeing a way out of it. But I decided that it isn't the end yet. And I can get that glowing light, that warm, safe place. I can get there. And I decided on my own, I told myself that I'm going to make a difference. I want to make a change. I'm going to get out of this. I'm going to be able to tell my story. I'm going to be able to help others. And it started off very simple with joking the next day, getting as much money as I could, and learning how to do a CV. Going back to the internet shop during the day, as clean as I am, getting all information I know about how to create a CV, put a bunch of information on that was not true, graduated and did some part-time work here. And I printed as many as I could afford. And I walked to every single shop and I gave him my CV. And I just looked for a job. I didn't want a handout. And one very important thing is there are so many good-hearted people in Fiji and in the world, but they give money to those less fortunate, and it helps them. It does make a difference. But when that money runs out, they have no direction, they have no guidance. They don't know where to go and get back into square one. And I didn't want that. I didn't want a handout. I wanted security, to be in control of my own life. And eventually I got an opportunity at the Republic of Cappuccino to wash dishes. And man, was I, but I was the best dishwasher. I didn't even use the actual dishwasher they had. I remember getting in trouble for that. I used my hands to do it. That was quick. I did my best. And that enabled me to start getting money. So work in the coffee shop, sleep at the internet shop. Back then, I was able to get clothes. I was able to look better. I didn't sleep anymore on the sides because I knew I'll get thrown out. So I tried to remain awake as long as possible on the computer before eventually hitting down and sleeping. And that's how I worked myself out of that.
No doubt you had the urge to one day sleep in a house with your own bed.
Mm-hmm.
That was your objective all along?
A home that I can call my own.
There's sometimes just, the theme that is spoken about in terms of people who live on the streets, that they want to live on the streets, that they keep coming back on the streets. What's your thoughts on that?
Being on the streets, being around those who were put there, not by choice. I cannot see how anyone would want to be on the streets. I understand that there are certain patterns where, you make an effort to take someone off it and they might go back, but there's always a deeper reason behind it. It is consistency. It's a support system. It's showing them a clear path on where to go. The majority of them just don't know where to go, what to do. They have no guidance. All they know is what they know. So what they've gone through and the things that they did to survive. And when you say you take someone off the street and they want to go back to the street, that's where they want to be. They don't want to do anything. I think it's a very lazy way to say, oh, leave them. We don't have to bother about them. But this is the future of Fiji. These are our youths, And now we're having elders. We're having very young children. There are women, pregnant women. Shouldn't be the case. And to say that they just want to be on the streets is, again, a very lazy way.
One of the things with the young ones, a sort of a similar theme that is also coming through, that they're coming from broken families. Mm-hmm. They either have families who shun them, or there's maybe a stepdad or stepmom that is coming that has made life very difficult, and they opt to get out rather than stay through that. Did you notice that the stories were similar in nature?
Absolutely. Many of the very young ones, I've always had an interest being on the street during that time. I had asked many of the others in the same situation because I was learning. I was trying to understand how to survive, how they got there, getting to know them. Many of them came from broken homes. Many of them came to the street where some of them were dropped off in Suva, at Sona Park. They were just dropped off. Lo, I'll come back. And they never came back. And these are kids. They're 7. I've had people that were 7 years old, 8 years old. And it's a scary place to be. It's a very scary, cold. No child should go through that. Every child deserves to have a home, a place where they can grow and be safe, especially here in Fiji.
Asta, the good news for you is your success story. You've come through a very difficult life, and I'm sure viewers watching tonight are just appreciating the fact that you never gave up. Seeing that orange glow there, you now have a very successful business into AI. If you can talk about how that came about.
Absolutely. During the time when I was transitioning out of it, working at the coffee shop, not long after that, a very good friend of mine, in this Michael Mauseo, had told me that he had a friend needing marketing services. And me, wanting to always grow further, went, I know how to do that. I didn't really know how to do that. But I learned, and during that period, literally the first or second day, I had acquired so much knowledge leading up to that from the internet, free information, and I had provided real life results for them. It was the merch that the serves, and we grew the page from a couple hundred to, I believe it was 48,000 during my time there, and it was very successful. And I knew I had a bit of a knack for that. As the years went on, I always tried to stick with the marketing aspect of things. Now, COVID happened. I was again out of a job, but I had built relations and I was safe and I could offer value. During that time, I was also a teacher at the international school in Pacific Harbour. All these students, all the teachers needed to stay home because of COVID, and they had no way of connecting. And the teachers were old school. They weren't very computer literate, which is completely understandable. So I was asked if I could create a Zoom session kind of class setup. So I created an account for every single teacher and every single student. And I coordinated with the principal, the teachers to get the sessions perfectly aligned. And that's how it had started. When COVID was slowly leaving and things were coming back to normal, they asked me if I would want to have a permanent position as a teacher, computer teacher. I said yes, of course. I love the students. And I spent some time there before I had, again, been given another opportunity to progress by working at Suva ports. Now, this is where a lot of the major changes happened. Working at the Suva ports, I would work my shift from 7 or 8 in the morning to 10, sometimes midnight, and then come home and then work on marketing, my marketing agency. I knew I wanted to start something on my own for security, right? Because I knew I had no school qualifications. If I ever left any of these positions, it would be very difficult for me to get back into it. So I got the idea of the marketing agency. I studied it and I tried to understand as much as I could on setting up a team, setting up a system, having structure, reaching out to clients, contracts, very green in it. And during that time, I managed to acquire my first client. Got a first client, found I need to registered the business as a sole tradership business, and that progressed. Now, I was very good at generating leads. This is where things switch up. I was very good at generating leads, which means I could go to a business, create a system that would bring them maybe 100, 200, 300 messages a day, every single day. But their in-house team did not have the manpower to answer to all these questions. And so I was creating more of a problem, right? Many leads, lost, people complaining. It was a nightmare. Then ChatGPT happened. And I said, oh, let me call in sick to work. I called in sick for 3 days, I believe, and I completely spent my time on ChatGPT, stress testing it, seeing what it could answer, seeing where its limitations were. I knew I want this thing to work for me, but I needed to know how to do that. I had no clue. I had no coding experience. I'm learning things as I'm moving along. I found a way to use OpenAI's API, which is like a password, to connect what they had, ChatGPT, to a knowledge base. A knowledge base is pretty much just a field that you put all the information about the business in, pricing, opening hours, etc. Connecting these two together, I created a chatbot system, the first of its kind in Fiji, that was running on large language models. It was the very first. I was not just one of the first in Fiji, but one of the first in the world, amongst one of the first. With this, I connected it to the first business, and every single message that came in was answered accurately within seconds. And their lost leads now became paying customers. Majority of them converting. People spending hours, talking to it, all these questions, and their internal team was relaxed. They weren't stressed. Now, that is what really changed the entire space for the agency.
Asta, so that's a great journey, and no doubt, it gets even more exciting with what you can do and what you may have in store for Fijians here. A lot of lessons learned there, I'm sure, about never giving up and growing out of very difficult situations with no support at all. Just my final question for you: do you still try in your different ways to assist those who are still on the streets?
Absolutely.
What do you do?
I've been very blessed to have what I have. I've been very blessed with the amount of money that's come in through my efforts. I'm able to support myself for the very first time in my life and my family. And I know that there are ways that I can give back. It's I want to make a difference. I want to be able to help those in the situations that I were in, and I needed a light. I needed support. The foundation, Haruka, is absolutely incredible. If I had something like that during my time, I would have progressed so much quicker. I'm trying to support them in any way I can, with whatever I have, whatever resources I have. I understand I want to have a foundation that's my ultimate goal is to have a foundation of my own where, I can help people. But with the current situation and where I currently am in my life, the most realistic thing I can do is support a foundation that has already been here making real life changes, really helping those that are in need. And so we're implementing and integrating all of our AI systems, whichever way we can, with their social media so that people can get constant interactions, constant connection, while their team on the field can focus on what it is that they're doing there. And so that will continue moving forward.
And before we go on a break, I just want to ask, when did you eventually get your own bed that you were dreaming of when you were lying down on the streets in Suva? And how did that feel?
It was, I can't give the exact year because that entire session, the entire timeline is blurry to me. But it was during the working time with the coffee shop, transitioning back and forth, coffee shop, internet shop, coffee shop, internet shop. He eventually got my flat in Rwanga. And my first bed was just a full mattress, just a mattress, no base, nothing. I had nothing else in the house. And laying on that bed for the very first time, calling it my own, that was life-changing. It was the first time I could breathe, exhale, and say, he did this.
Esther, thank you very much. A very heartwarming result from the journey that you've had, and no doubt a success story that through our show will take to many around the world and around the country in terms of the journey that the people have on the streets. And we wish you all the best in your future endeavors. And we hope that one day you'll be back again to share more success stories in your life. We'll be back after this break.